don't think that it's a stretch to say that the Bloodline may go down in history as the greatest faction ever in the WWE. At the very least, it has to be in the conversation based on the storylines they've been involved in, the individual members' accolades, and their accolades as a group as well. And now that Jacob Fatu has joined the Bloodline, we now have a nice even number of a total of 10 people that have been a part of the Bloodline, which means I can now channel my inner watchmojo.com and do a top 10 list of the best Bloodline members. So in today's video, I'm going to be ranking those Bloodline members from worst to the best member of the Bloodline. Obviously, this is all my opinion, but I think that my opinions are going to be fairly similar to perhaps yours. I don't think they're going to be wildly off. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring that bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I am confident that you're going to fall in love with this YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. All right, let's jump into it. I know when I say that I'm ranking these from worst to best, I don't necessarily think that if you're lower on the list that you're necessarily bad. It's just that this is a really iconic faction. So in 10th place really comes the one member of the Bloodline that in my opinion hasn't really done anything, but I don't want to sit here and belittle him, call him trash or anything like that. It's just we haven't seen enough from him to really be able to grade him outside of the 10th spot, that being Tangaloa, who recently joined the Bloodline at Backlash in France, where he helped the current members of the Bloodline, Tonga and Solo Sikoa, defeat Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. The funny thing about Tangaloa is that he's already been in the WWE before, didn't really get any traction as a member of the WWE main roster in the early 2010s. Then he went off and made a big name for himself in the independent circuit in New Japan, and now he's come back to the WWE as a member of the Bloodline. But even in his time outside of the WWE, when he rejoined the WWE as a member of the Bloodline, there was, I guess, a lot of hate coming his way because a lot of people who are fans of New Japan said that Tangaloa wasn't very good, and they shared a lot of clips of him just doing shitty wrestling moves, which admittedly were really shitty. But I tried my best to make sure that none of that impacts my current view of Tangaloa. I'm just gonna let the guy cook and do his thing and let him impress me with his current day run, as opposed to letting other people's opinions on him, on his work that he's done outside of the WWE, overall impact my opinions on him. But the thing is that we haven't really seen enough from him, and I am concerned because he's been there enough time to make at least a little bit of an impact, and I just don't think that he has. I think that in ring he's been okay. He hasn't really necessarily blown me away. He hasn't been bad by any means, but it's also from a character point of view where he really does feel like an NPC that's just existing. He's not had the opportunity to say anything on the microphone. He's not had the opportunity to develop as a character. He's not really had his backstory as a member of the Bloodline and how he's connected to the Bloodline be explored. So he does, and I hate using this term, sometimes feel like a bit of an NPC character within the Bloodline. So I'm hoping here that with time they explore Tangaloa a little bit more, as opposed to him just being a body, an extra ruthless member of the Bloodline. I'd like to learn a little bit more as to who this man is. So really, to be honest, Tangaloa lands at the 10th spot almost by default, because at the very least, every other member of the Bloodline has had the ability to be able to explore themselves as a character, or has done enough in ring to get me excited over what they are capable of doing in the future of the Bloodline and in their time during the Bloodline. So Tangaloa lands in the last spot, and I have a feeling that a lot of you guys would probably have him in the 10th spot as well. Coming in at 9, almost also by default by how little he's been in the Bloodline, is Tangaloa, the other member of the Tongas. Here's the thing, unlike Tonga, Tangaloa has been cooking in the ring ever since Roman Reigns went on his hiatus after WrestleMania 40 and Tangaloa joined Solo Sikoa's version of the Bloodline. He's been the one that's been kind of carrying the Bloodline from an in-ring perspective, because he's been the one that's been having the singles matches, he's been part of the tag team matches, and he's been the one that was part of the King of the Ring tournament. So the WWE has been highlighting Tama Tonga's in-ring prowess as opposed to his character work, because really he is just sort of like the little kid from the Wild Thornberries. He's just going around, yeah, like making noises and being intimidating, as opposed to, again, exploring his motivations into who he is ultimately. But we have enough of his body of work in the WWE as an actual in-ring performer that I am nothing but impressed. Tama Tonga is incredibly good as an in-ring performer, and that's been proven now. Now what I want to see is further development of who he is. I want to see further development of how he came to be a member of the Bloodline. I want to see further development as to what he wants to achieve now that he's a member of the Bloodline, what he's looking to achieve in the WWE. Get me behind him now as a character, as opposed to him just being the anchor for the Bloodline as an in-ring performer, because he's demonstrated that he is that guy for them. So honestly, there's nothing really bad about him. He's just low on this list because of how little we've seen of him as a character as a whole and how new he is to the Bloodline. At number 8, we have the current tribal chief of the Bloodline. I don't know if we can necessarily call him that, the false tribal chief. At least as of the making of this video, we do have Solo Sikoa. Solo Sikoa in the early days of the Bloodline was the enforcer of the Bloodline, and I do think that he played that role really, really well. He was intimidating, he was scary, and if you had to get in the ring with Solo Sikoa, there was a very good chance that you were losing, and there was a very good chance that you were leaving in a stretcher. However, after WrestleMania 39, he sort of just became the punching bag, not just of the Bloodline, but it seemed like all of the WWE, because this man went on an insane, nearly 0-100 losing streak in the WWE. They tried with a major feud with him and John Cena, him destroying John Cena and almost like physically and symbolically destroying and ending John Cena's career, but that did absolutely nothing for him. It didn't elevate him in any capacity whatsoever. And for the majority of the time in his Bloodline, he was the quiet guy in the corner. He didn't really speak. He didn't really have any motivations, as opposed to just Roman Reigns just pointing and telling Solo Sikoa where to go and what to do. The thing is that worked in that early iteration of the Bloodline, because there were so many characters around Solo Sikoa that could really help flourish the Bloodline as a whole. You could have the quiet guy that doesn't talk in Solo Sikoa, because you had Sami Zayn there, you had both the Usos, and of course you had Roman Reigns there to really help balance out the rest of the Bloodline. But him as an individual character during that time never really stood out. However, since WrestleMania 40, we're now seeing the WWE give Solo Sikoa that ball and really allow him to start running with it, as he's this false tribal chief. He's forcing Paul Heyman to do his bidding. He's being really a tyrannical member, a tyrannical leader of the Bloodline that's really only there because the vacuum of power was left when Roman Reigns departed the WWE. His best stuff does come when he's intimidating Paul Heyman, but outside of that, he doesn't really, frankly, have this presence that Roman Reigns ever had. Not saying that he needs to match the presence of Roman Reigns, but when you're the tribal chief, I think the expectations are really high. So I do think that there's still a lot left on the table to really understand Solo Sikoa, and we need to give him more time to flourish as this evil heel, tyrannical leader of the Bloodline. We want to see where it goes, but right now, as of the making of this video, I haven't been entirely impressed with him as a leader. So it's because of that why he's a bit lower on this list. But really, again, I don't really have too many bad things to say about him in his run as a member of the Bloodline. This is kind of crazy, but honestly, in 7th place, I'm already putting Jacob Fatu in there. Jacob Fatu, in the 4 minutes that he has had as of the making of this video on WWE TV, frankly, did more than Solo Sikoa ever did in terms of being an intimidating like bodyguard or intimidating enforcer presence that we were supposed to believe Solo had. Jacob Fatu did that and way more in 4 minutes. I might be having some recency bias, and I'm willing to admit that, but I was so honestly impacted and left borderline breathless with how much Jacob Fatu did in those 4 minutes to instantly elevate him to the top of the card and to instantly elevate him as, frankly, right now, the most important member of the Bloodline aside from Paul Heyman. I am curious what the Bloodline would have looked like if back in 2022 at Clash of the Castle, it had been Jacob Fatu instead of Solo Sikoa. I think that frankly the Bloodline might have been better, even better than it already was, and it was already fantastic during that time in late 2022. They said that they were holding off the debut of Jacob Fatu because they were afraid that he might overshadow Solo Sikoa with how good he is, and I think they were right. I think that they were right about the fact that he would overshadow Solo Sikoa with how impressive he is, because he is, and frankly, he is overshadowing Solo Sikoa with how good he is in just 4 freaking minutes. That's 4 minutes. This makes me so happy. Oh no! Oh, that was a sneak preview of this week's Wrestling is Cool Match Club, which is exclusively available over on patreon.com/SantiZap. This week, we're looking at Kurt Angle versus Rey Mysterio, SummerSlam 2002. Abyss versus Sabu in a barbed wire massacre match. The famous Firefly Funhouse match between The Fiend Bray Wyatt and John Cena. The WrestleMania 22 Classic between Kurt Angle, Randy Orton, and Rey Mysterio. And the Indie Darling ladder match between Kevin Steen and El Generico. Not only that, but on the Patreon, you get the Raw review, the SmackDown review. You get so much more content. Come check it out. It's patreon.com/SantiZap. It'll be the top link in the description or the link in the pinned comment. Come try it out, even if it's just for 1 month. I'm confident that you're really gonna like what's over there. Okay, now back to the video. At 6, we're gonna start getting into some classic members of the Bloodline. None of this Bloodline 2.0, bootleg Bloodline. We are now looking at Jimmy Uso. During the majority of the time as a member of the Bloodline, he just sort of existed. To me, he was not quite as emotional or quite as interesting or quite as layered as somebody like Jey Uso was during the heyday of the Bloodline. But I do remember the early days of the Bloodline where he and Jey were struggling to fight off the tribal chief who was trying to make them acknowledge him and succumb to his power as the head of the table. And that was some really good shit. And although I didn't like the heel turn that happened at SummerSlam, because to this day, it doesn't make any sense as to why he turned on Jey Uso, I really like the character that they developed afterwards. This insane guy that really thought that he was more important than he actually was within the Bloodline, and starting to call shots and starting to call audibles. But the Weasley nature of Jimmy Uso really catapulted him as a really special individual single star with this new persona. Has he reached the levels of Jey Uso or the other members of the Bloodline? No, but what he has done is something that Tonga and Tangaloa, and to some degree Solo Sikoa, haven't been able to do, is create an individualized personality within the Bloodline that stands out. He isn't just a member of the group. He doesn't just blend into the background. He isn't just there. He is an individual unit within that group that as a solo act is quite entertaining. I can't wait to see what kind of Jimmy Uso we get back. I hope he still has that same kind of delusional personality that he has, but maybe finding a way to make that delusional personality work as a babyface. I think it'd be really entertaining. At number 5, we have Jey Uso, who has been able to find major single success ever since leaving the Bloodline. But during his time in the Bloodline, he was arguably the most interesting character at times. Of course, he was the one that was fighting off Roman Reigns in the early days of the Bloodline and has some fantastic matches with some great story beats and some great promos as well. And even though he eventually acknowledged the tribal chief and blended within the faction that was the Bloodline, even when he was just a member of the Usos, he always stood out to be the one that had the most personality, and that personality started to come out more when Sami Uso joined the fray. When I look at some of the most important moments in the Bloodline history, they almost all involve Jey Uso. The Bloodline Civil War. We can look at the stuff with Sami Zayn turning on the Bloodline and Jey Uso just being in absolute shock and disbelief. We can look at the trial of Sami Zayn where it was Jey Uso that vouched for Sami. We can look at, of course, the start of the Bloodline when he was taking on Roman Reigns. There are so many awesome moments that are attributed to the Bloodline that really Jey Uso was the one that made special. Just think of, man, I don't give a damn what the tribal chief says. That's all Jey Uso and the great layers of a character that he was during that time. I know it's been now almost a year that he hasn't been in the Bloodline, but I'm sure that the story beats of Jey Uso reforming with the Bloodline with Roman Reigns, Jimmy Uso are just around the corner. At number 4, I have to have Sami Zayn. I think that Sami Zayn borderline saved the Bloodline. The Bloodline was going through a bit of a rough patch after WrestleMania 38 in terms of interest. A lot of people felt like they were becoming a little bit too one-note, but when they added Sami Zayn, the honorary Sami Uso, to the storyline, it honestly elevated not just the Bloodline, but every single individual member of the Bloodline as well began to demonstrate more individual traits. That's where Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso started to really flourish as individual characters as opposed to just being the Usos. And Sami Zayn's story within the Bloodline was honestly kind of a thing of beauty, just this misfit toy that was trying to find a place where he could belong, and he for some reason found the place where he definitely doesn't belong in the Bloodline, and through just sheer charisma and sheer determination to demonstrate his loyalty, he eventually found his way in there right beside the tribal chief Roman Reigns. And the storyline that came with the breakup of the Bloodline, the stuff leading into the Royal Rumble, the trial of Sami Zayn, the Elimination Chamber match, the stuff at WrestleMania, the stuff at Night of Champions after WrestleMania was just amazing. When you really think of the Bloodline as a whole, everything that they've been involved in, I know that the recent stuff with the final boss is still a really top of mind, and it's really easy to pick that as the best thing that the Bloodline has ever done because, I mean, it involved the goddamn Rock, and it was really, really good. But without the star power of the Rock, before The Rock joined the picture, the best thing that the Bloodline had done was the run with the honorary Sami Zayn. It was genuinely fantastic storytelling. And number 3, we have a recent addition to the Bloodline, and that is the final boss. It's going to be Bloodline Rules, Mama Rhodes. The Rock in this heel run as a member of the Bloodline was generational. It changed professional wrestling. For a time, it felt like it was this niche thing, and then The Rock came and made it this huge global event throughout the 4 months leading into WrestleMania. In that time, he made wrestling, like he said, cool, and he made it mainstream. But the evolution of the final boss was like a weekly thing. It was a new song, a new change of lighting, a new guitar riff to his entrance theme, a new attire, a new set of sunglasses. Every single week, The Rock would just evolve and evolve and evolve, ultimately becoming the final boss, this character that I think all of us are going to remember forever. I think kind of similar to Sami Zayn, The Rock really added a breath of fresh air to the Bloodline at a time where Roman Reigns was more or less absent. It was being run by Jimmy and Solo and Paul Heyman, and it just wasn't clicking. And then The Rock came back, and then all eyes were once again on the Bloodline. At 2, I have to have the wise man, the voice of the Bloodline, still the best promo in professional wrestling history. Paul Heyman is where it's at. He's been in the Bloodline from day one. He did get kicked out for like 3 weeks from the Bloodline there, but he's been in it from beginning to end. And frankly, in many times, he's been the best thing about the Bloodline. I would say as of the making of this video, Paul Heyman is the most entertaining, best thing about the Bloodline. This storyline of him waiting for Roman Reigns to come back and save him being abused by the current iteration of the Bloodline, it's really good stuff. I don't think that this is a hot take. Like, Paul Heyman is just the best manager in the history of WWE, and then you add him to arguably the greatest faction and one of the greatest champions to ever grace the WWE, you're just gonna, by default, make magic. And then at number 1, you gotta acknowledge him. It is the tribal chief, Roman Reigns. This doesn't work unless it is because of Roman Reigns. The way that he completely changed up his character when he came back after that hiatus post WrestleMania 36 to come back from the big dog and be the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, the way he changed his moveset, the way he changed his finisher for a bit from the spear to the guillotine, the way he changed his in-ring presence to as a to talking shit, to talking smack, to telling a story, not just physically, but now with words during the pandemic, completely changed storytelling in professional wrestling, in my opinion. Roman Reigns finally arrived as the tribal chief because they tried so hard from 2015 to 2020 to make it work as the big dog, and it just wasn't landing. It wasn't until he completely threw out all the conventional things that we expected from Roman Reigns out the window and brought this entire new package to TV that he won everyone over. And yes, I know that a lot of people have a bit of a sour taste in their mouth because of Roman Reigns' super light schedule over the last year, but before that, man, like, that guy was there weekly. He was there every single pay-per-view. He was there every single SmackDown, and he was the most important thing in WWE TV, period. And of course, he was the head of the table, and as the head of the table, he was the head and the face of the most important storylines in WWE for the past 4 years. But yeah, I'm just gonna take this moment, even though he's not really appearing on TV these days, to acknowledge the tribal chief, and I think you still should too, because Solo, you're not the tribal chief, brother. It's this guy right here. It's Roman. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think, what you feel I got completely wrong. Where would you put Jacob Fatu? I think I might have overrated him there, but that's it. I'm done. Get out of here.